Hello, everyone. Just going to invite people to take their seats, please, and to please put their cell phones on silent. Hello. Please take your seats, folks. I have a few announcements before we begin. On Wednesday is National Canadian Film Day. We are screening Beethoven's Nine, an Ode to Humanity. And we will have the director, Mr. Larry Weinstein, here with us to do a little Q&A. Next week, Friday, we have a film in French, Lundi Cinéphile at 2 o'clock. The film is Les Enfants des Autres. And then another film on the 24th, we are screening A Real Pain, 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. And then the 29th, I have a conversation with novelist, essayist, and poet Marilyn Bowring, moderated by Elaine Kallman-Naves. She will be here in person the 29th at 2 o'clock. Those are all of my announcements. And here is Dr. Joe Schwartz with Science Demystified.
Thank you. You'll notice I have a stool today. Guess why? Yeah, back pain, which I suspect is not unknown to many of you. How many of you had this back? Yeah. So you know what it's like. I mean, mine started innocuously. I was just bending a little bit, but I guess the wrong way. I wasn't trying to lift a car off a kid, so that's when it started. And I mean, at first it was excruciating. It was really unbearable. And as you may know, narcotics don't work for that kind of pain. They don't work for nerve pain. So things like morphine, Dilaudid, Demerol, it's like candy. This thing beats everything. It takes time, I'm told. So we'll see. All right. Anyway, today we have an interesting topic for you, which fits very well into our motto at the office to separate sense from nonsense. As you know, there's a lot of nonsense out there. There are many snake oil salespeople, and we try to flush them out and change things to science. And this is especially pertinent when we're talking about the paranormal. Well, what does para mean? Para comes from the Latin for beyond. So we're talking about things that go beyond the normal. Now, when you go to a magic show, you are seeing things that appear to be beyond normal. You see rabbits come out of hats, right? I mean, you know that there's something unusual about that. But you also know that there's a secret there. You're just not privy to the secret. I mean, you know that a rabbit doesn't materialize out of thin air, right? So, and then you see illusionists do things like the zigzag, which seems absolutely impossible, right? You see a lady cut in threes. Well, the thing about that, I like that illusion, and well, when you do that, you got to carry around that large cabinet, and you got to carry around large women. So I like to do these on a smaller scale. And here is my lady. Familiar with so here's my cabinet. Nothing in there. Put the lady in here. And we're going to do the zigzag. Look at that. Right through. The middle is gone. We'll put it back. There's as good as more. Thank you. Now, as you can see, that's a lot easier than having to carry around the equipment. But you know what? It is what you just saw. Essentially the same principle as is done on the larger scale. And then, I think you can turn the lights down. Then you also see magicians levitate ladies. But again, you realize that there is something there that's holding her up, either from the back or from below. And you've probably even seen a hoop, passed right through. Well, there is a way to do that, avoiding the support that there is. And there's nothing paranormal about this, and it's enjoyable, right? It's entertainment. But there are people who claim that they can do this for real. That is, that they can levitate, and sometimes you even see pictures of this. Now, this goes back to the 1930s, which was sort of the heyday of the seances. And today, of course, you're very familiar with the fact that you can fake pictures unbelievably, right? I mean, what AI can do is just amazing. But even back then, they were able to do double exposures and trick photography. But the public didn't really know about that. So there was belief in this kind of thing that people could actually levitate. Even today, there are yogis who say that they can do this. But I'd like to see one close up. No one, of course, has ever seen that. It completely goes against the laws of physics. Now, the fact is that when someone claims to be able to do something paranormal, the burden is on them to prove that they can. The burden is never on a scientist to prove that something cannot happen. There's no way to do that. You cannot prove a negative. Maybe there is someone in the backwoods of Siberia who can levitate, right? I doubt it, but that's why you can never say something with 100% certainty in science, because you can't possibly test everyone in the world. So let's take a look at some of these interesting paranormal phenomena. And we're going to start with extrasensory perception. And I think you probably heard about this, right? People will look at cards like that, and there'll be someone remote, and they will try to transmit the message to them, and they guess it. Well, you have to make sure that when you're carrying out experiments like this, it is under controlled conditions, because there have been many such attempts where cheating was involved. It's just that the experimenter didn't realize how the cheating was being done. Let me show you. Oh, here we go. I actually do have extrasensory perception. Okay. I have the 4 queens here. You can't see them, but for now you have to trust them. We're going to do an experiment. We're going to do thought transmission. I need someone. All you have to do is receive. You don't have to move. You don't have to go anywhere. Who's going to help with it? Okay, lady right there. All right. So the 4 queens, for now, you just have to believe me. Choose either the 2 red queens or the 2 black queens. Tell me. Red. I will take the 2 red cards here invisibly and put them here. Okay. That leaves the 2 black cards here. Yes. The queen of spades and the queen of clubs. Choose one of them. Tell me. Queen of clubs. So what I will now do is invisibly take the queen of spades out of here and put it with the other cards that you told me to throw away, right? So you chose the queen of clubs, right? Independently. So wouldn't it be amazing if there's one card here that's turned around and it is the queen of clubs? Oh, well, no, not yet. But what is really amazing is that you picked the only card that has a red back. But what is even more amazing is that it's the only card you could have chosen because the others are all blank. So let me tell you how this was done. You thought that you were making a free choice. You weren't. Because while we were doing this nonsense, I was concentrating queen of clubs, queen of clubs, queen of clubs. And that's the message that you got. So obviously, we have now demonstrated extrasensory perception. All right. Let's look at some of these paranormal beliefs. Almost 50% of the population believe that ESP is possible. There has never been a trial, a scientific trial, that shows that this is true. Never. Not one single reported such trial. And yet people do believe it. They believe in devils. They believe in deja vu, that you come to a place and you're sure that you have been there before, but you also know that it's not possible that you were there before. Astrology. Oh, let me just go to that. Astrology. Quarter of the population believes in this nonsense that the planets and the sun and moon govern our lives. A quarter of the population believes in clairvoyance. Some believe in out-of-body experiences. What does that mean? Well, some people say that they can leave their body, float out of their body, and go back into their body. Actually, once I was giving this talk, and there was a lady who started waving her hand at this point, and she said she could do that. Now, imagine how thrilled I was, because here was someone who was actually claiming to be able to carry out a paranormal event. And I said, great, I have a way of testing this. And she said, oh, yeah? So I said, look, I have a deck of cards here, which I had, and there was a bookcase in the room. So I said, look, I'm just going to take one of these cards, put it on top of that bookcase face up. You float out of your body. You float over to the corner, look at the card, climb back into your body, and tell me what the card was, right? I mean, that's a fair trial for someone who says that this is exactly what they could do. So, of course, at this point, she kept humming, oh, yeah, well, it doesn't work all the time. It's not, I can't just decide to do it. It just happens. Anyway, obviously, came up with all kinds of excuses and never did divine the card. But still kept saying that, she could do that, leave the body, float out of her body, and look down on everyone. Now, there is such a phenomenon that actually has been scientifically shown that you may have heard about. It can happen during surgery, where the patient says that they've actually floated out of their body and looked down on the surgery being done. No one has a real good explanation of how that happens, but it is a repeated phenomenon. It has something to do with the anesthetic. Because some people can have various illusions when you're under anesthesia. And that's one of the illusions that can occur. So that's interesting phenomena. Then there are events that are scientifically explicable, that people think are paranormal, but actually not. For example, walking on hot coals. This, if you ever see this, is a very impressive thing, where they will have a long bed of hot coals, and you can put a paper near the coals and it will immediately flare up. So this is certainly not fake coals, and yet people will just barefoot go across the bed of coals. How does this happen? Well, people like Tony Robbins, who you may have heard of, one of these wellness gurus, who claims that this is a demonstration of mind over body, that you can actually control your sensations so that you feel no pain at all. This is not that. It's a very interesting phenomenon. When you have coals, the top becomes a layer of soot, which is actually insulating. So when you walk across at a decent pace, you just don't feel the heat. You do not stop and have a conversation in the middle. But if you walk across at a decent rate, you can do it. I've done that. And also, when you're going to do this, you do sweat a little bit so that you do have a layer of sweat on the bottom of your foot. And that, of course, absorbs some of the heat. And one way to understand this is to think of a cake that you're baking in the oven, and it's in a metal pan, okay? And you jack up the temperature in your oven to, let's say, 450 degrees, right? So everything in that oven is at 450 degrees. But you can touch the cake with your finger. You can't touch the metal pan. But both of them are at the same temperature. How do you explain that? Because the metal conducts heat very effectively. It transfers the heat to your finger. The cake doesn't transmit the heat. So the same way, when you have soot covering the coals, the soot does not transmit the heat. Now, what I would propose to someone who says that they can do this because of the power of the mind, that they have learned how to overcome pain, I have a demonstration possibility for them too. Let's take that bed of coals and let's put aluminum foil on top of it. Now you walk across. Well, I can guarantee you that they will hot-foot it out of there very quickly, because the aluminum, of course, will transmit the heat very, very effectively. So it is something that can be made to look paranormal, but it's not. It's actually very scientific. All right. We're also very poor observers. People think that they're good observers, but they're not. Look at this picture. Is there anything interesting that you see there? The tree, is it doing anything for you? There are some faces. Faces of who? I'll give you a clue. American presidents. Mercifully, Trump is not there. But now when you look, you can see the faces, but they're not immediately evident. But I will show you something that is even better in terms of demonstrating observation. This is the classic. What do you see? Who sees a young lady? Who sees an old woman? Half and half. Now that I told you that you can see either, can you see both of them? Right. So it's very interesting how you can't always rely on your eyes, you know? Everyone see it now? The young lady is facing backwards. That's her nose. It's her eyes. She's wearing a bonnet. And this one, that's just a lamp. But it can look like something else. Now, here's another very good one, okay? Don't say this out loud. I want you in your mind to count the number of times the letter F appears in this passage, the letter F, but don't call it out loud. All right. Who sees 1, 2, 3? These are all the people who see 3. If you see 3, 4, Look at all the people who see 4. 5. Look at all the people who see 5. 6. All right. We have an intelligent audience here. And yet, you saw different things from the same passage. How can that be? Because we're not as good observers as we think that we are. Most of you did not see the F in off, right? There are 6 Fs in this passage. And yet, some of you, I don't know how you could have seen 1. Someone saw 1. Okay, some saw 2, many saw 3, some 4, some 5, and some 6. Now, isn't that interesting? All right, now why do I talk about this? Because we're going to get into unidentified flying objects. There are many people who claim that they have seen these UFOs. Right now, UFO means unidentified flying object. That's all that term means. So if you're out there and you see something like this, it can be very compelling until you realize that it's someone throwing a frisbee. But if you happen to be at just the right angle and it just whooshes by from one tree and hides behind the other, you might see this. Now, UFO does not mean unidentified flying saucer. It means unidentified flying object. Okay. Now, there are people, of course, who claim that they have seen UFOs that appear to be made by intelligent beings, right? Obviously, not on Earth. So they claim that they've seen things like this, and they take pictures of it. Right? It can look pretty impressive. Now, isn't it curious, though, that all the pictures that you see of these unidentified flying objects look like they were taken by with a camera from the 1930s by someone suffering from Parkinson's disease. Today, when everyone is running around with their cell phones, right, with telephoto capabilities, you get beautiful pictures on your cell phone. And there are billions of cell phones in the world. Yet, no one ever is able to take a proper picture of one of these UFOs and say, oh, yeah, but I've seen 60 Minutes. And I saw the segment that they had where a Navy pilot says that he saw such a thing and that it appeared to be following his plane. And then all of a sudden, it took off at a 90-degree turn, which, of course, is impossible, when someone with momentum. But, the pilots swore that this is what they saw. Well, they saw something, right? I mean, there's something there. They happened to take a picture of it, again, very, very blurry. I don't know what they saw. Nobody knows what they saw. It's a curiosity. But you would think that if there really were people visiting us from out of space somewhere, that they would have left some sort of evidence, some memento. Where did all of this start? This belief in UFOs started back in 1947 with a claim that an alien spaceship landed at Roswell, New Mexico, and crashed, that is. And the claim was that it had been spirited away very quickly by the armed forces because they had captured the aliens in it and the vehicle, which actually looked, that picture, very similar to the capsule that we saw, right, used last week. And then you may even have seen videos on the internet about the so-called alien autopsy, suggesting that these aliens actually had been captured by the military And they autopsied it and confirmed that they were aliens. And the video is actually very interesting. Here is a scene from the video. They should have been more careful. Anyone know why? Something that this, of course, supposedly was taken at that time. You see the telephone? It has the curled wire. That didn't happen at that time. It wasn't possible. So obviously this video was faked much later because this didn't exist. But anyway, this has become a whole business in Roswell, New Mexico. And, everything there is UFO themed. And they tell you the story of how the Air Force actually found parts of this vehicle, and they will even show you pictures of what was found. The supposed parts of the alien spaceship. Well, that's not what this is. We know these days exactly what it was. It was part of a secret balloon that the US was using at that time to monitor Soviet rocket launches. And these were balloons that could go up to great heights and photograph what was happening. And some of these balloons had dummies in them because they were experimenting with possibly sending humans up that high. And it is one of those that crashed. And this is well documented. It's well documented in the so-called Roswell report. And yet we still have all of these stories about how there are aliens that were autopsied in a hangar there, and the spaceship is there, and it's all being hidden, and that the presidents actually have been informed of this, and they know, and they keep this secret, and I'm sure Trump has not been informed one way or another, because the first thing would be it would spout out of his mouth. All right, now all of this, of course, doesn't mean that it's impossible that we have been visited by aliens from somewhere else, because we can't prove a negative, right? What we know is that they haven't left a footprint here. They haven't left anything that can be identified. I think that it is very likely that there are other civilizations out there, some more advanced than us and some less advanced than us, because I think it would be quite egotistic of us to think that on this tiny little planet in our galaxy, which is made up of billions of stars, and there are trillions of galaxies out there, how realistic is it that on this one little planet circling about a tiny star, our sun, is that this is the only place in this gigantic universe where life would have somehow evolved? I think that's unlikely. However, I think it is also unlikely that we are being visited because of the distances involved. Okay, just think about this. We have taken one small step off this earth, right? We actually have been to the moon, even though the Flat Earth Society debates that, and says that it was all faked and it was just movies shot on a movie lot. But we have been up to the moon, and we know that the earth is round. Anyway, the reason that I say it is so unlikely that we're being visited because of the distances involved. The first planet where there could conceivably be life, because there could be water, there could be air. I mean, we know that there's certainly no life in our planetary system, right? Is 4.2 light years away from us. That is 40 trillion kilometers. Okay. Now, to get back to what we saw last week, which really was a remarkable mission, right? Because we went further than we have ever gone before in space. We actually went past the moon. That distance was about 400,000 kilometers from Earth. What is that compared to where the first planet, where there could be life? So the 40 trillion miles where the first planet could be is 100 million times the distance that we have gone. These distances are almost, incomprehensible to us, right? So we're not traveling trillions of miles. And if someone out there had the technology to go faster than light, which physics tells us is not possible, but let's say they develop some miraculous method of teleporting people, why would they do this secretly? They would have nothing to fear from us with their technology, right? Why wouldn't they just land in front of the White House and say, here we are? Why do they land in front of someone with a pickup truck in North Dakota, right, who sees them? So although we cannot prove that we have not been visited, but it is extremely, extremely unlikely given the distances involved. Okay, let's move along with our paranormal phenomena and look at coincidence. Now, this is one that is hard to battle because the evidence is sort of seemingly there. Like this dollar bill, which was printed in Dallas in 1963. That is well documented. The number 11 refers to the place in the US where currencies are printed, the mint. The number 11 is the code for Dallas. This was printed about 3 weeks before the Kennedy assassination. Okay, that is not hearsay, that is a matter of fact. So what do people say? Look, the serial number starts with K and ends with A, which means Kennedy assassination. The number 11 refers to the 11th month of the year, which is November. 2 times 11 is 22nd, which is when he was assassinated. Is this the future being foretold, or is it a coincidence? Well, I think it's an interesting coincidence. I don't think the universe tells our fortune and money and currency, but it is interesting. So is this one, this $20 bill. When you fold it in a certain way, there it is. What does that look like? The Twin Towers, right? Just after the airplane crashed into them. Sort of interesting. And then if you fold it in another way, it's the Pentagon being hit. And yet, fold it yet another way, and you see Osama. Interesting, right? What is really interesting is how anyone found that. Who the hell goes around folding currency to see what it will reveal? Okay. Now, I would suggest that this is a coincidence, but we can't prove that. Interesting. Now, suppose, no, there's no date. There's no date, but it was after, not before. It was after the event. Yeah. Anyway, if you were playing cards, gin rummy or something, and you picked up a hand like this from a well-shuffled deck, right? A deck that you shuffled, and then you would think that fortune smiled on you, right? If you picked up this hand, you would never think of anything of it. Okay. Now, the hand that we saw before, this hand, has a probability of occurring. It is very rare, but they have calculated that if over a 5-year period, you estimate the number of hands of, I think they did bridge, that are played in the world, someone somewhere in that period will randomly pick up a hand like that, just by nature of probabilities, right? And they, of course, will then attach some paranormal possibility to that because you think it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's just very improbable and very rare. But the probability of picking up that hand is the same as the probability of picking up this specific hand. But you would not attach anything to this because it doesn't mean anything. Well, this is how fortune tellers work. They will tell you a lot of things, and some will be true. You will remember the ones that are true, and you will forget all the others. But we can check these things because people do make predictions that are written down, and then we can check. And of course, sometimes you have to wait a long time to check. Now, in 1993, psychics made these predictions. White House shocker, Clintons will split up. Well, that did not happen, even though there was plenty of reason to do that. Paula Abdul did not elope with Arsenio, and Martina did not have John McEnroe's baby or anyone else's. Okay? Now, most people, of course, don't go back and check these things, but we do. And what you can say is that predictions very rarely come true. But when they do, they will publicize them. So what fortune tellers do is just shoot at a target. And they shoot a lot of stuff at that target. Some will hit the bullseye. And then you say, oh, yeah, of course. Now, these psychics tend to be very clever. And they will capitalize, on things. So in this case, of course, they are aware of something that the person isn't aware of. And they are very good. They will very quickly reel off a lot of possibilities, and they will see when someone kind of shows interest, and then they, start going at that. I must say, yes, they are entertaining. They're very good. On TV, people like James Van Prague. They are also very rich. This is a mansion that he bought from being a fortune teller on TV. He gets almost everything wrong. But when he gets one right, then, of course, that gets a lot of publicity. This is how they all work. John Edward is another one. Now, they make the money, and they're always buying big mansions, and it's really quite interesting how people just totally forget the nonsensical things that they say, but remember something that has hit home. Or, they'll start out by saying, is there someone out there who's thinking of Julie? And that person will have, friend or relative or someone named Julie. Then they will start, as if they knew that someone was thinking of that. They're very clever with the way they can twist things. But the fact is that statistically, they just don't hit the mark very often. But when they do, you hear about it. Then there are events that we refer to as non-existent. They seem to be paranormal, but they don't actually happen, such as the full moon effect. I'm sure you've heard about that the crazies go crazier at the full moon, that there are more hospital admissions at the full moon, that the police get more calls at the full moon, right? Well, this actually goes back to the ancient Romans and the lunatics. Luna is the Latin for moon. And lunatics were people who supposedly went crazy at the full moon. The thing is, though, that this is something that we can check, because you can check hospital admission records, you can check police records, and this, of course, has been done. And what do we find? We find that there is no difference statistically. Same number of accidents, same number of everything happens with the full moon. But suppose you have something happen to you and you look up, there's a full moon. You make the connection. If there wasn't a full moon, you would never think about it again. And next time in the future, which may be way in the future, something else might happen at the full moon and you say, oh yeah, it's the full moon. That's what did it. That's why we have to keep statistics on these things. That's how you can prove whether events happen or not. Something else that is not happening, but people think it is astrology, which of course is absolute nonsense, thinking that somehow the planets and the stars can influence us. But it can go to the highest levels. There was astrology in the White House, you may remember this, under Reagan's time, because Mrs. Reagan believed in astrology. And she would organize the president's meetings based on this. She was listening to Joan Quigley, who was her astrologer. Tell you an interesting little bit about Joan Quigley. Where was she during the earthquake in San Francisco? Smack in the middle of it, with her house collapsing on her. So the astrologer who was giving advice to the president of the US about when to have meetings with Gorbachev, she didn't know that her house was going to be struck by an earthquake. Now, of course, there are many books that are, interesting, disproving astrology statistically, but I don't think we need to go into this any further. This is just a physical impossibility that what is out there is actually controlling us. Then there are absurd explanations for things. Maybe you've heard of people spontaneously combusting, just bursting into flame. There are books that have been written on that. In fact, Dickens, of course, is fictional, but in Bleak House, one of Dickens's books, there's someone who spontaneously combusts. But there are many accounts of this, of people just sitting in chairs and all of a sudden bursting into flames. Now, sometimes there is even some evidence for this, such as this. This is a real picture. This is not a doctored picture. This was a lady sitting in an upholstered chair in front of a fireplace, and this is very often used as a proof of spontaneous combustion. What happened is that the chair actually caught fire, and the circulation in the room was such that the air kept flowing upwards. It created sort of a chimney effect, and she caught fire, and she burned, and one part of her body was left because the chair collapsed away from her. And of course, the firemen and the police investigated this, and it's all well documented. It is indeed a very curious business. I mean, it's for sure, but it's well documented. So strange things do happen, but just because they happen doesn't mean that there's something paranormal that is going on. But the worst part of all of this is fraud. When people are fraudulently convinced that something is happening and it is said to be paranormal. You may remember back in 1978, the story with the crop circles. All of a sudden, these strange circles appeared mostly in cornfields and in wheat fields. It happened mostly in Britain, but some of it happened in Canada as well. And they were intricate patterns that appeared spontaneously overnight. And these were large. The farmer would come out in the morning and look at his cornfield, and there would be these giant circles or different kind of patterns there. There were many articles written about this at that time. No one could explain it. Suggestion was that it was somehow done by lasers from space. Now, why they would want to do that, who knows? But that was a theory. Turned out to be fraudulent. Very cleverly done. It was started in England by these two guys who eventually confessed to all of this, and they did it in a pretty simple way. They had a plank of wood with which they went around like that, stomping on it, and a rope tying them to the center of a circle. So they just went around in a circle, stomping with the plank of wood. And they created all these circles. And then, of course, there were the copycats. And they did it here as well. People do these things for several reasons. One, to see if they can fool people. And then, of course, somehow to make money off of it. Because once they, of course, owned up to this, they were in all the talk shows, telling their story, writing a book about it. They made a lot of money off of it. Pretty clever, I would say. But no, they were not circles that were hewn into cornfields by aliens. Now, once more, to get back to magic. I mean, that when a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat, that there's a trick involved. But that has become, the sort of symbol of magic. I used to do that, actually. It's the only trouble is with doing that is that you got to keep the rabbit between performances. Now, let me tell you, these are not good pets. I actually had two of them. And, you don't want to keep them in the cage all the time. So you let them out. And they have, this is a phenomenon that I know is true because I witnessed it and no one has been able to explain it. They will chew telephone wires. No other wire. They will not chew any other electric wire. They will only chew the telephone wire, and they will strip the insulation off of that. And I had two rabbits that did exactly the same thing. Incredible. So there are strange things out there. They also leave their calling cards everywhere. What an interesting phenomenon that is as well. It's almost, like as soon as they eat something, it comes out the other end. It's just like an assembly line, and that wherever they are, but so it was a lot of trouble to do that, and I don't have rabbits anymore. Anyway, these days pulling a rabbit out of a hat doesn't even go over that well because people have seen all kinds of miracles, with AI and special photography and whatever. But magicians used to have much more success because it was easier to convince people to believe the unbelievable. Today, no one would think very much of that, right? Think, of course, this can be done. This illusion can be easily done. I can fake it or whatever. But no, this wasn't faked. That really was her real head. You know how that was done? Actually, I can show you. This is something we call black art. Okay, show a bag with nothing in it. Now watch carefully. 1, 2, 3. And that giant coin appears. Well, how does that happen? Obviously, the coin has to be in there all the time. You just don't see it because it's hidden behind a black cloth. Okay, so it looks like there's absolutely nothing in there. Then all of a sudden, there it is. Well, that is the same thing. She's wearing a black turtleneck against a black background. So, of course, it looks like her head is floating. Anyone know who the magician is? A very famous contemporary of Houdini. That's Harry Blackstone Sr. And he actually performed in Montreal. I think it was in 1960 at Her Majesty's Theatre. You remember Her Majesty's Theatre? It was on Guy Street. Yeah. And yeah, he performed there. Fantastic show. In those days, it was, easier to trick people and to amuse them with magic. But obviously, there's a scientific explanation. Now, we're still talking about fraud. And this is where it really becomes vile, because there are people who cheat and lie for money, tricking people. Psychic surgery. Psychic surgery is a very interesting phenomenon. This refers to making incisions in people and taking out diseased parts. Usually they claim tumors. And after the surgery, there's no evidence that there has been any surgery. You actually see the stuff coming out, but there's no incision, anything. And the person is convinced that they have been healed. This is awful, this kind of fraud, but it's very convincing when you see it close up. You can even see, blood kind of coming out. And then after, there's nothing. How do they do this? Okay, now you can show the light. So this is what you would see. Psychic surgeon would just first rub their hands all over the patient's body, and then they would zoom in on where the problem was. And then they would reach into the wound, and take out the diseased part. Now, I'm not going to be gross about this. They usually use a piece of chicken liver or a piece of cotton soaked in blood. I'm just going to represent it with this. There's our tumor. Okay, so they took it out, very convincing. Now, how is this done? How can you make something appear out of nothing? It's not that difficult. You just have to blow on it, and you see it disappear. Now, you can actually make it even more colorful. I told you I don't use a rabbit anymore because he's so troublesome. So I use this rabbit. And the nice thing about this rabbit, you don't have to feed it. It doesn't eat your telephone wires. And when you want to get rid of them, it's gone. Okay? So you will hear stories of these psychic surgeons in the Philippines and sometimes in South America do this. People pay money for this. Desperate people will do desperate things, right? I mean, I'm not desperate enough with my back to go to a chiropractor, but it might be possible in the future if it doesn't get better. Anyway, these fraud artists should pay penalties. I mean, the law should have something to say about this when people are cheated like this. Houdini, of course, was great at unmasking, fake mediums, etc. well, you don't have to say fake mediums. He was very annoyed when he saw that they were using the same kind of magic tricks that he used on the stage, and they were using them to convince people that during seances they could materialize objects that from a ghostly world. They would have hands floating in the air to prove the presence of spirits. And I mean, you can do that. You can conjure up a spirit. Be gone. Tell you a little secret. You should never do this effect in front of you with your hand. All right, one more phenomenon that is really objectionable is psychokinesis. This is the ability, the supposed ability to bend objects by the power of the mind. And of course, famously, Uri Geller did that. He was one into spoon bending, right? Well, spoon bending is a very interesting phenomenon. Someone want to stand up and just come here a minute? Just make sure that that is a real spoon and you cannot bend it. Okay, thank you. Now, watch this. Looks like it's bending. Look, I can even do this. Here. Check the spoon. Right? It cannot be bent. I know it can't be bent because it's a very, very good spoon. I stole it from Celebrity Cruises. Because wherever I go, I try to find spoons that can't possibly be bent. Because once I had a spoon like this and I gave it out to the audience member, and it turned out that the guy was a bodybuilder and he bent it. But this one cannot be bent. Right. Now, Uri Geller, of course, does it. He's very good at doing it. I actually, 2 years ago, visited his museum in Tel Aviv. It's in Jaffa, actually. Anyone been there? Fantastic. It's a whole building, and Yuri, of course, deserves credit for becoming a millionaire, multimillionaire from a stupid little magic trick. But he did invent that trick. Anyway, he's been around the world. He met famous people everywhere, and he's got all these objects in his museum. I mean, fantastic. Michael Jackson's jacket, because Michael Jackson was best man in his wedding. He's got a helmet from one of the astronauts on the moon. He's got this car, it's a limousine, with thousands of spoons on it. Someone did that, welded all these spoons. I mean, it's really amazing. And it was very interesting. He himself guides you through the museum. He does a guided tour. You have to be a group. You have to call up and you have to be a group, and he will take you through and guide you. And, so I was all set to confront him, because I've long been annoyed, of course, by this business of people cheating others by doing magic tricks. And I couldn't do it because I can tell you he was engaging, he was humorous, He told good stories, and it just wasn't opportune to, to be confrontational. And anyway, at the end of the tour, he did the spoon bending trick. And he gave me the spoon signed, which I have. And he told me, just wait, because once I'm gone, this is going to be worth something. Well, I don't like to think of that because he's exactly my age. So I hope that spoon doesn't go up in value soon. But he was, very good. Anyway, classic story with Uri is that when he first came to the US, he was on Johnny Carson's show. And the effect that he was going to do there was another one of his classic effects, where you had a bunch of film cans. You remember 35 millimeter film that came in those cans? Well, he had a bunch of those cans. He'd go off stage and someone would pour water into one of those cans and mix them up. So there were the cans on the table, water in one of them. And he said he can divine which one has the water without touching anything. So he comes and he hovers his hands and he keeps doing it. And I see that he's taking longer than he normally does. Okay? Because I'd seen this before. He did it on other shows and he always got it right. I said, this is going on too long here. So, but I knew how he does that trick. He does the trick by slightly nudging the table that the cans are on. And of course, the one that has water in it is heavier and it doesn't move. Johnny, of course, was an amateur magician. He knew this. So while Yuri was off stage, they crazy glued the cans onto the table. So now, when you watch this, and you can find it on YouTube, you can find this on YouTube. You see he comes, sits down, he sort of accidentally nudges the table. Nothing happens. And then he's practically kicking the table, and still nothing happens. And he says, well, this is the way that psychic phenomena work. They're not at your beck and call. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. And he goes on and, tells this to Johnny, and they leave it at that. Johnny wasn't going to reveal how, but anyway. The next day, Uri was on the Donahue show. Everything worked. Because I guess, Donahue didn't really know what was happening or played along. I mean, most people don't know that you can go to a magic store or get a magic catalog and buy, apparatus and buy a key bender and learn how the spoon bending trick works. And all of that is great if you're doing it as entertainment, not pretending that you have some sort of psychic power and doing it for real, and especially not pretending that you have some sort of psychic power that can remove tumors from a body. So, leave you with one last idea, that things are not always the way they appear to be. You have to look below the surface, and things may be very, very different. And just think, what is more probable, that nature should go out of her course or that a man should tell a lie? And I think you know the answer to that. So that's just a little bit of stories about the paranormal. There are, of course, a lot more because there are a lot of charlatans out there. And there's still mediums out there, who charge you money for foretelling the future or for reading tea leaves or reading your palm, which of course is all nonsense. All right, so that's it for our psychic phenomena. None of you remember seeing Harry Blackstone Sr., Her Majesty Theatre? I had I gave the similar talk like this about 10 years ago, and I had someone in the audience who had seen Houdini at his last performance here in the Princess Theater on St. Catherine. You remember when the Princess used to be a theater? Some of you must remember that. Then it became a movie theater, and now it's something else. I mean, the building is still there, and I've been trying to get them to put a plaque there that this is where Houdini last performed. Yeah. Dr. Kim doing what? Repairing the back? Well, I mean, there are surgeons who can repair your back. I mean, there are osteopaths who can make you feel better. Yeah, I mean, I don't know Kim specifically. I mean, there are treatments for back pain, so it's not necessarily a scam. Yeah. I didn't get that. But when you when you see something that seems to be impossible, that's what you're saying, right? There's a there's a trick. If you're seeing something that seems to be against the laws of nature, you're seeing a trick. But of course, no magician ever wants to give away how something is done. Yeah. The same thing happening in two different places? I don't know. I'd have to see that. I mean, I'd have to see the statistics on that. Uh, things do happen. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to look at it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way humans are, though, I mean, when some random thing happens, some unusual thing happens, you tend to find an explanation for it because you don't think random things happen. But random things happen. Yeah. Yeah. I'd have to see. It's hard to comment on this, without seeing the phenomenon. Yeah. Oh, yes. I met the great Randy many times. He was actually a speaker at one of our symposiums 15 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful man. Uh, a great performer, of course. And he was also a great debunker. Yeah. In fact, the picture I showed you of the psychic surgery, that was Randy doing it. What? No one ever collected the $1 million. No. The Randy Foundation still offers $1 million to anyone who can perform under controlled conditions any paranormal phenomenon. Many have tried, none have succeeded. Yeah, yeah. David Copperfield is probably the best known magician in the world now. David is really a very interesting fellow. He has, believe it or not, he has sold more tickets to a live performance than anyone else in the history of the world. Yeah. Now that's because before he had residency in Las Vegas, he would travel. He was in Montreal several times, but he performs in Las Vegas and he does 2 shows every night and he does 3 on Saturday. I mean, it's hard to explain why someone would do that, except that you constantly need your ego massaged. You need the adulation. Why on earth would someone who has made millions and millions, he's wealthy, he's got a private island, he has a private airplane, he's got absolutely everything. Why would he have to do 3 shows on a Saturday? Okay, it's to me it's inexplicable, except that you just need the audience reaction. Now, that being said, he does a wonderful show. And of course, there certainly is an art to doing a show that you've done thousands of times, but making the audience feel that they're the only people at that time and they're the only ones who see that show. And he's very good at doing that. And it's a very, very entertaining show for sure. Now, of course, when you have money like he has, you have your engineers design all kinds of, I mean, the vanish of the Statue of Liberty, if you remember that. I mean, that was a very expensive illusion. I mean, I can tell you how that was done because that's never going to be done again. There was a platform built in front of the statue with tiered seats on it, right? Like theater seating, with 2 columns in front and a curtain that could be pulled up in between. So when you were sitting there and looking at the statue, you were sitting, on this tiered thing, and you saw the 2 poles, and as the curtain went up, and then the curtain went down, and the statue was gone. It was an amazing thing. It was a live telecast at that time. It wasn't taped. It was actually a live telecast. The reason that this took so much money to do, anyone know? The stage or the seating on which you were sitting turned. Now, it was, of course, temporary seating. So when you walked up, I knew it was kind of rickety, and the music was blaring and he was talking. You just didn't notice. All they had to do was twist it a little bit, and the statue was hidden behind one of the columns that held the curtain. It's difficult to imagine unless you really see it, but that's how it was done. It was super illusion. But of course, no one's ever going to do that again, and obviously to build that whole thing was very expensive. But he does put on a show. He also has the most Houdini memorabilia of anyone. He's a collector of Houdini memorabilia. He has his own magic museum, all kinds of fantastic things, but no one is allowed in, only by private invitation. I never got that. Stanley. Yeah, yes. I mean, that's been done in many places. There are many surgeries that can be done under hypnosis, but that got a lot of publicity when Nixon first went to China, when they used acupuncture supposedly without any anesthetic. It's the same idea. Is if you are convinced that you're not going to feel pain, there's a certain amount of pain that you can withstand. Under hypnosis or under acupuncture, it happens, but it cannot be major surgery. It's minor stuff. But many times they use a local anesthetic. In fact, that's what they did in that Nixon case in China. They actually used a local anesthetic that was never revealed. But I mean, hypnosis is interesting. You can be hypnotized to feel less pain. All right, so we'll see you next month.